So I'm part of a School of Social Sciences in Edinburgh, and I also have an appointment in Vienna. So I split my time. This work that I'm presenting today is joint work with my postdoc, Marta Campi, who's based at UCL in London. And yeah, next slide. And it's based on earlier work where we were trying to, well, I was trying about a decade ago to elicit expert opinions on the back of an environment that had multiple clusters of such opinions, and where the experts were often partly hidden. In other words, it was not apparent who and how one could identify an expert. So the methodology starts into an approach to think of finding ways of objectively identifying expertise, and also approaching them and eliciting their response in a method that would that is most likely to be successful. So in other words, because experts are oversampled, if you like, there's too many requests on their time, it's unlikely that they will participate in a study or in your survey unless there's some specific reason. And the specific reason here I have found in multiple such studies. Now I'm giving you just an outline of the first one, but I've deployed this more than a dozen times now, is the referral. So the referral strategy is what elicits response rates, or elicits high response rates. And employing the waves on a snowball as a method of understanding where the population is and how many different clusters of opinion exist is what this attempts to do. So in order to deal with this challenge of accessing experts, in order to elicit the response in a positive way without giving them other incentives, this is the method employed. Next slide, please. There's multiple constraints. Some colleagues already mentioned a number of them. The biggest one I could think of is aggregating responses, or finding ways of, in the most advanced mathematics we could think of, there's always elements of error, and aggregation to me seemed a crude method. Of course, we have all types of reliability measures like intercoder reliability and others that we could deploy, but I felt that this is unreasonable. The competence of experts also is often mentioned in the literature as an issue. You know, we have experts that vary widely in their level of expertise. I mentioned elicitation already, and of course the centrality of a specific question to the respondent is again an issue. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that this is a methodology that was developed a decade ago, and it's now under further development based on multi-wave snowballs. The network analysis allows us to determine clusters of expertise and the relevance of the experts to their peers. Is based on in-depth expert surveys, and the data analysis itself integrates multiple methods. So it's multi-mode, it's also multi-mode, but integrative analytic approach. Next, please. I'm not going to get you, but I don't think I should burden you with the analysis of the research design here to take you through step by step. To just mention here that there's two elements to the research design, two instruments to elicit responses, and the instruments are used separately. The strategy involves both network analysis in terms of constructing a referrals network, but also, as I said, mixed methods in the analysis and evaluation of the data. Next slide. I understood the remit of the workshop to imply that you want some more information on what it is that the instruments would look like, and the instruments look like having a name generator that includes contact data, heuristic ratings of expertise for alters, of course permissions for referrals, and permission to approach again. And the data includes both the wave of the snowball as well as identifiers of referrals and referees and their attributes. So this shouldn't take more than 5 minutes. Next slide. The second now instrument is the real survey instrument. On the back of the first instrument, we would have, we elicit a network of experts, and the second instrument allows then focus on those experts that we have predetermined a certain level of a threshold into their expertise. So thresholds to expertise could be very sophisticated, or it could be as simple as a degree to expertise. In other words, how many others have referred to you as an expert? The mixed method data now collection, as I mentioned earlier, involves all different types of questions, including relational questions that are unique to this type of instrument. And of course, the data itself could imply some content analysis, sometimes associated to natural language processing, so very mathematical, sometimes related to more qualitative content analysis. We have also used the Delphi method to go back to experts. So in other words, a multi-stage, not just multi-wave, but multi-stage process, and eventually we integrate the method, multiple methods to the analysis. Next slide, please. So the example I've showed you, two-wave snowball, allows us to cluster expertise and then not aggregate these different experts in different areas, but actually consider them as different types of expertise, or different, or for instance, it could be something that's intangible, and in that case, it is a different type of different type of approach to the same type of question. So they could be approaching the question from a different direction. It's very important to know who amongst those that I would externally consider an expert, this population of experts also considers an expert, because their opinions would matter most. Next slide, please. This is what it would look like. So it can be delivered in 8 to 12 weeks. Again, because you told me you wanted to have an idea of how could this be implemented. These are the different stages, and this is how long it takes. Next slide. So what are the advantages of the approach? The approach reduces selection bias, inherent in any standard method of initial seed samples. Oops. Provides an estimate of the population size. There's a statistic to provide an estimate of population size based on referrals across a snowball. This goes back to 94 paper on the Journal of Official Statistics, and that's also a fundamental point for us, because this allows us to then, if we decide to aggregate the results, it would allow us to do this on the back of having a boundary to that population, recognizing what the boundary to the population is. So therefore, a measure of relative sampling, we can identify clusters of expertise, improve response rates, and improve content validity to such methods. Next slide. And this is just a sort of the list of topics of the list of advantages I've just mentioned. We're working towards pseudo representativeness now, and also we work towards reconciling reported discrepancies. And I think that's all I had to say today.
Thank you very much, Dimitris. Thank you very much for your presentation. Okay, now we have 9 minutes time to be able to answer questions or make discussions or take a short break to start the next part of the webinar, which is going to be in something like 8 minutes from now. So if there is any question right now, you can chat your questions in the chat space. You can just post your questions in the chat space, or you can just open your video and ask your questions directly.
I'll ask one.
Please, Victoria, go ahead, please.
I guess I'm just interested in hearing a little bit from Sama about the qualitative elicitation, and very briefly, what the aim is. Is it to help elicit more diverse types of knowledge, or to really unpack the knowledge?
Okay, that's a great question. Thanks, Victoria. I guess that And if you, at one end of the spectrum, you ask every expert the same set of questions, say in a survey, or if you do it in person, you have that opportunity to probe their responses. If you do it in a group, they can also discuss with each other. But if you go more into an interview situation, you can really unpack those responses, and even if you're working one-on-one or in small group situations, you can then go towards co-creating knowledge. So instead of thinking of experts as actually having the knowledge already sitting in their head and you're just trying to access that, it's more about how they might be looking at things from a different perspective and revealing knowledge that they hadn't really put two and two together. And so that's more of a collaborative kind of exercise. So yeah, it's just a different perspective again, and more, yeah, I think it's more along the lines of unpacking.
We have another question in the chat space that if speakers are interested to address, I think that it probably would go mainly to Dimitris. Dimitris, do you want to address this question, or others if they are interested? We have a question from Preeti. Yeah.
So I just put a response there. This is why this is one of the biggest challenges to all expert surveys that I've come across. That what is the population of experts on which you're drawing from, and because that cannot be determined, of course, you know, the sampling doesn't make sense until you start using methods where you bound that population on some parameter, on some, and that's where the snowball comes in, because you can actually estimate what is the population size, and it would give you an estimate that says the population size is 200. And if I've surveyed 100 of those, then I have a sort of a measure of pseudo representativeness, saying that I've actually sampled 100 out of my 200. So I hope that provides an answer.
Is there any other speaker would be interested to comment on the sample size issues?
I would be. I think when you're like eliciting ideas and knowledge, then yeah, the snowball works. But if you're taking an aggregate below about 5 experts, then you're starting to get aggregation that's quite sensitive to outliers. And then above about 12 experts, the contribution of an individual makes very little difference to the aggregation. So we often say between 5 to 9 experts usually gives you a pretty good robust average if you're going to get a good average at all. And then of course you can do things like performance weighting as well.
But that assumes, if I may come back to that, that assumes some sort of a process of aggregation to the answers. If all responses are valuable, and therefore you want to see, you know, anything about clustering, there's an assumption. For instance, a lot of expert surveys depend on the assumption that we will forecast. But there's a number of concepts that are intangible, and there's no point to forecast. So if you're trying to forecast future, then I can understand how you would want an aggregated view of a group of experts. But if you're trying to capture intangibles, you're interested in all possible opinions. So the notion that very common in qualitative studies, that there is a limit to the diversity of opinion. And once I've reached that, once I have saturated in terms of what type of opinion I elicit, I can stop. I think in some cases, I have an issue with that, but not across the board. So,
Ahmed, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, sure. My concern about the responders, and it's coming from the results of previous study. As far as I know, less than 50% of the selected individuals were, responded to the questions, and most of them are coming from countries like Russia, Eastern Europe, and north parts of the South America. And what do we know about those people? Because certainly there is some information available in that countries, but we don't have access to those information. Is it because some problem we had in selecting those individuals, or there are maybe some some rules and regulations that prohibit them to provide information? And I don't know how we can fix this problem in our future studies. Are we going to eliminate those individuals that did not respond to our questions, or we want to add some more individuals from those countries that did not respond to our queries.
Any comments from other speakers based on their previous experiences in global surveys?
I can go very quickly. We don't know a lot about the cross-cultural appropriateness of some of these protocols. So there might have been, you said that there were some questions that were offensive to some cultures. That could be a thing. And also, you also said that there was a lot of questions and experts get fatigued. So you're going to get a higher response rate if you really reduce the questions down to the most important questions. And if you're honest with the experts before you recruit them about the time requirement, and then also trying to think about if it is going to be a longer, how do you incentivize them? Do you pay them, etc.? But as for the individual countries, I don't know much about that nuance. It would be good to get some feedback from those experts.
Could I ask a question, please?
Direct, just kind of addressing the concern that was an issue. Ali, do you want to kind of add to that?
Yeah, I want to just add one point that some of our respondents had language problem. For example, from Russia, and it was a two-way problem. We couldn't access to them because of their language, and they didn't have enough English publications and English websites that we could reach them. And the other part was that to who we could send them the questionnaires, they were not able to reply to the questionnaires because of their language. It was one of the problems that we, in the middle, we tried to solve. And as Hamed, you remember, we didn't have enough time and we didn't have enough power to solve this.
Absolutely. And I just kind of, for the sake of time, I should say that for the next global surveys that we are going to do, we are going to translate the surveys to at least something like 10 to 12 different languages. So that would be one of the strategies that we'll have in terms of having surveys translate to other languages.